Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. Thank you so much for joining us for Startup Canada's Entrepreneur Town Hall today. These sessions are where parliamentarians and entrepreneurs can share insights and thoughts around the changing landscape during COVID-19. So welcome to this afternoon session. This afternoon, I'm really delighted to host the Honorable Rachel Bendayan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, and a Member of Parliament for Outremont, Québec. Merci Rachel pour ta participation cet après-midi. We had the pleasure of working with you during our International Women's Day program in March, and we really value your support for Canada's entrepreneurship community as demonstrated today. So thank you for that support. Over the last 4 weeks, we've really had the pleasure of hosting a number of co-chairs of the All-Party Entrepreneur Caucus, so MP Ruby Sahota, MP Dean Allison, and MP Gord Johns, and the minister that Rachel works with most closely, Minister Mary Ng. So we've had some really fantastic conversations as COVID-19 continues to evolve and the impacts shift since sort of mid-March up until today. So we're really encouraging entrepreneurs to connect with parliamentarians and with government to both vocalize some of the challenges that they're facing, but also provide a space for our government to really provide updates on the supports that are in place intended to support entrepreneurs. We are really thrilled to begin today's conversations, and Rachel, really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on some of these updates. And we're going to kick things off with a few opening remarks. So I'll pass things over to you, Rachel, to make an introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kayla. Here I am, like plugging in my computer. Yay. All good. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks again for that very warm introduction, and to your entire team at Startup Canada, who's been organizing these amazing town halls every single week. I know you guys are working around the clock for your members, and it's just so great to see. It's so important, obviously, now more than ever, to have that support and that infrastructure for our small business community, for our entrepreneurs and our startups. So thank you for doing this each and every week. Startup Canada est un ardent défenseur de l'esprit d'entreprise au Canada, et je sais à quel point l'organisme joue un rôle important dans le secteur privé, et aujourd'hui plus que jamais le soutien que vous offrez est tellement crucial. Alors merci beaucoup au nom de nous tous. I know that you recently spoke to Minister Mary Ng for a town hall, and I was able to chat with her a bit afterwards. I could tell you she just loved the experience. She said it was engaging, informative, very helpful for us. I know it seems strange to say, but these conversations help us inform changes to the programs that we roll out. And sometimes I speak to entrepreneurs and they say, it's hard to follow because things keep changing. And I say it's because I keep speaking to you and you keep bringing back good feedback, and then we want to adjust. And so that's what we've been doing over the course of the last couple of weeks now. And as we were discussing just a few moments ago, Kayla and I, the importance of of having you there to tell us what the reality is on the ground during a crisis situation is not only important for us, but also important for you. I know how hard you've worked to turn your ideas into a business, and now you're being asked to close your doors. Literally, you're being asked to stop, put your pens down. And I know that that's hard. It's been tough for everybody, but for our entrepreneurs, I feel in particular. But I also know that we'll get through this. I know that if we continue to partner in the way that we're doing now, that we'll find each other on the other side. And you certainly have an ally in Minister Ng and in myself in fighting for you around, around the government tables in Ottawa. We have regular phone calls and we report back to the Minister of Finance, to the Prime Minister directly on what needs to be done in order to better support you. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But I just wanted to maybe give you a little bit of background about me, both personally and professionally, I guess. My interest for small business and my love for entrepreneurship, you know, it comes honestly, I guess. Firstly, my riding in Montreal is a bit the Silicon Valley, or to use a Canadian reference, I guess the Waterloo region of the province of Quebec. We have a real cluster of tech companies, of startups, of all sectors here in the Mile End. And I spend a lot of time speaking to entrepreneurs in my community. Also, before I was elected now just over a year ago as Member of Parliament, I had the privilege of serving as Chief of Staff to the Minister of Small Business. And at that time, we were pushing very hard for many things, including to lower the small business tax rate from 11 to 9%. And that lowered rate is what I hope many of you on the line are currently benefiting from. We started the Women's Entrepreneurship Program, and I can tell you that Minister Ng and I are more motivated than ever to make sure that that continues, that we stay on track, that we maintain our goal of doubling the number of women entrepreneurs in this country. And so we talk about this regularly, and the work continues on that front. On a more personal level, my husband is a small business owner, and I can tell you that I feel very directly the anxiety and the stress that he's feeling. You know, from having to stop completely his sales and closing his doors, to reducing his own salary, to not being sure when the money is going to come in for you know, for wages or for his operational expenses. You know, all of that is something that I literally live with. So I understand what you guys are going through. À peu près 75% de nos petites entreprises comptent moins de 10 employés. Alors, c'est vraiment des petites entreprises dans le vrai sens du terme. Ces entreprises s'apparente plutôt à des familles peut-être un peu élargies. On célèbre des anniversaires, des mariages, des enfants. On vit au sein de cette entreprise. Et c'est particulièrement vrai pour des petites communautés francophones au Canada. À ces endroits, les petites entreprises sont des lieux de rencontre qui font partie du tissu social. So, I mean, to help business owners like you keep your teams together, keep that family unit in place, we introduced a wage subsidy program, and I'll be able to get into more details a little later, but you know, I just wanted to give you the sense of the thinking behind, you know, why a wage subsidy. Well, it's because that is not only you know, a way to help Canadians directly, your employees, you know, continue to receive their remuneration, but also to help our businesses keep their teams together and be ready for when we're able to reopen the economy. When we're ready, you'll be ready. And I think though that is critical for me in terms of objective. I know that we will be probably answering questions on what are the next steps. And I think that the wage subsidy is a good example of us very much taking into consideration how we can move forward in the future quickly and efficiently. We're also you know, very pleased with the pickup on the $40,000 loans that we have put in place. I believe now we're at about 500,000 businesses having been approved for these loans, if not more at this point. So I think that you know, that has also been a very, very popular program. Et ce prêt sans intérêt de 40 000 $, ce qui s'appelle le compte d'urgence pour les entreprises canadiennes, et est un prêt assez important pour nos PME. C'est non seulement sans intérêt, mais une partie également qui est non remboursable à la fin de la journée si vous remboursez la balance. Alors, quand je parle aux entrepreneurs, ils sont très intéressés par ce prêt. Si ce n'est pas déjà fait, il faudrait contacter votre banque, votre institution financière afin de faire la demande pour ce prêt. maybe I can touch very briefly on our innovative startups and high growth companies, because we've tried to adapt our programs in order to respond to your realities, to their realities. So when we heard that there were some startups that didn't meet the program criteria, which required some historic data, and when we heard from some of our tech companies that they were not qualifying, we created a new program under the IRAP, the Industrial Research Assistance Program. And we also provided additional funding to Futurepreneur Canada. Now, I know Startup Canada and Futurepreneur work very closely together often. And so, if it hasn't happened already, please, connect on that level, because there is some additional funding that has been made available, in both of those places. I might just give a quick little plug for the $2,000 benefit that Canadians are receiving from coast to coast to coast. It's one of the first programs that we put in place, and it is what is helping so many, particularly independent workers, contract workers. There are some, entrepreneurs who have a startup who've told me that it's really thanks to this $2,000 a month that they're able to keep going, because they don't have a payroll, they never paid themselves a salary, as of their new startup. But if you did make an income of $5,000 or more in the last 12 months or in the fiscal year of 2019, you are eligible for this $2,000 benefit. And so I encourage anybody who's not getting it and who does qualify to look into that. I guess I might just end it there, but there are a number of other smaller programs that are out there, and there will be more coming over the course of the coming days and weeks. We totally understand that there are certain circumstances that are unique, and that we might need to look into those in a little bit more detail if you're having trouble finding a program that can help you. But that's also why I think this type of connection is important, not only for the conversation that we'll be having today, but for you to feel like there's somebody that you could reach out to that can answer your questions. And so I'm sure Kayla would be happy to pass on any specific questions or comments that you might not feel comfortable raising today on the call, so that I can answer you directly and get you the information that you need. So in order to leave enough time for this great conversation, I'm going to pass it back to you, Kayla.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel, for those wonderful opening remarks. And for those that have jumped onto the call, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have asked for our audience members to provide some questions ahead of time. That's what Rachel and I will be reviewing momentarily. But as this conversation evolves, you're welcome to flag those questions. And if we don't have time to get to them, as Rachel mentioned, we'll get those to your team and back over to you as soon as possible. So you've reviewed a number of the government of Canada's support functions, specifically with finance support. So with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and with the emergency wage subsidy that's now open. Can you give us a little bit more information about the additional finance options that entrepreneurs specifically can access and where they can access those services?
Sure. I mean, I think that the most important place for our entrepreneurs is their local bank, and it's because we've been working with banks to ensure that they have everything that they need in order to support our entrepreneurs. The $40,000 loan that I mentioned is available through whatever bank you have your business account in, and there are also EDC and BDC supports available through your local bank. So if you have a payroll of between $20,000 and $1.5 million, you are eligible for that $40,000 loan that I mentioned, which is again interest-free, government guaranteed, and also has $10,000, which is forgivable if you repay the balance by the end of 2022. So that has been, I think, the most popular form of liquidity for our small entrepreneurs to date. But there are a few other measures. Some of the ways that we're trying to keep more money in the pockets of our small business owners is by deferring GST and HST and custom duties payments for businesses for the next 3 months. That it helps to the tune of 3.2 million businesses. So we're really touching everybody with this. We're also extending the tax filing deadline to June 1st. And so I know that that date is coming up fast now, but that has allowed, businesses to keep, to have a little bit more time and keep a little bit more money in their pockets. The other thing that I might mention is the rent assistance program. I'm sure we'll touch on it later again, but that program specifically came as the result of so many conversations that people, elected officials, were having across the country. Myself, the minister, and really every member of parliament was hearing from entrepreneurs that rent was a real issue. It was in many cases a life or death issue, and they wanted the government to step in. It was extremely difficult to get our head around how we could do that, given that it is a provincial jurisdiction. But we have worked with our premiers of provinces and territories from across the country, and we've come up with a program. So happy to get into the details of that a little bit later. But I guess, again, I would go back to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy as perhaps the last measure I would highlight in response to this question, Kayla. The wage subsidy program is as I said, designed for many reasons, but it was opened up online just last Monday. And I believe tomorrow, the first payments will be made, I would imagine, to the businesses who applied early on last week. But happy to see that money will be flowing this week to businesses across the country.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. That's very helpful. In terms of additional financial assistance, maybe the parameters around the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and with the Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, what are the timelines that are around these programs that entrepreneurs should know about?
Sure. I mean, I maybe I jumped the gun on this question by saying that that money was flowing this week, but essentially we opened up the wage subsidy program. I believe it's 10 days ago now on Monday of last week. It's a very, very fast turnaround time, as you can imagine, to get money out the door this week. But we're doing it, and we're doing it because we know that businesses not only needed to make a decision as to whether or not to rehire employees in some cases, but also there were many businesses that kept their employees on payroll and that needed to get that funding quite quickly in order to keep them on payroll. And so I've heard all kinds of things, from businesses, as I've said, that had let go their employees and that are in the process of rehiring, to other businesses, letting me know that this really would make the difference, for their company. Either they own their building or rent is a lower expense for some businesses, wage was right up there, if not the first major operational expense. So it's been a very well received program. We had put in place a while back now a calculator function online. It's still available should you wish to go in and check out how much you're eligible for before you apply. But the application process is quite straightforward, and so far the comments have been very positive on how to use it. There are particularities for restaurants, for example, and how you treat commissions and tips, and all of that information is available either online through canada.ca/coronavirus or through me and Kayla and others that can help you get the information that you need. And I believe you also asked about the CERB, or the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So that response benefit, the $2,000 that I mentioned earlier in my remarks, is available for any Canadian who has either stopped working entirely due to COVID-19, or who has lost income and or reduced in some way their salary due to the crisis. And the interplay between the wage subsidy and the response benefit has been the subject of a couple of questions. So if you are having any concerns around that, feel free to reach out. Once you do get the wage subsidy, you cannot continue to get the response benefit. But if there is overlap, there will be an opportunity for folks to pay back, the response benefit in due course. So that, I don't want to stress out people too much about that, but there is a function on canada.ca to deregister yourself for the CERB if you're going to be receiving a salary through the wage subsidy or otherwise. So just to give you a little bit, I believe we're at about 8 million Canadians getting the CERB at the moment, possibly more by now, but to give you a sense of how big these programs are, it's mind-boggling to be honest that that all of this has been put in place so quickly. But I continue to and we continue to tweak the programs as I've been saying. So stay tuned, for more. But I feel with respect to the response benefit in particular that that we did respond to a lot of the startups, the really small businesses and those sole proprietors who were paying themselves either in dividends or otherwise, and who weren't considered eligible for EI. We made sure that they were eligible for Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and that that was in large part due to the work of Minister Ng and others fighting for startups and small business owners.
Yeah, and that's sort of echoing that sentiment from our feedback perspective, talking about these sole proprietors and these solopreneurs. Seeing that support is coming in for them, it is great, and I think continuing that work is incredibly important within that audience group. But thank you for those remarks, Rachel. In terms of navigating restarting the economy, we've had a number of questions and updates that we're seeing both provincially and speaking about it federally about opening up the provinces. Can you share some of the federal government programs and plans for what economic recovery looks like as COVID-19 subsides and as we sort of prepare for the next coming months?
Sure. I mean, I could do my very best. The reality is that the things change on a daily basis. Just to give you an example, the premier here in Quebec made a change on Monday, whereas businesses, some at least, were supposed to open next week. It's been pushed off by a week. And that's just the reality of a crisis situation, particularly one that that involves the complexities of a virus that we don't know very much about yet, to be honest. And so, as medical research continues, as we see the data, and we continue to look to our experts, we have to rely on our health professionals and experts in order to make the best decisions possible. When it comes specifically, to a plan to restart the economy, we're certainly alive to it. We're certainly working on it, but the details or the specifics that you're probably looking for as entrepreneurs is really of provincial jurisdiction. It'll be dependent, as it was here in Quebec, on Premier Legault, and the same will be true for your province and territory, wherever you may be across the country. And I think it makes sense not only from a jurisdictional perspective, but also just when you think about the differences that in regions, how COVID-19 has hit some regions more than others. There will be a slight difference between how one province might move forward versus another. We are working closely with all of our partners at the provincial and territorial level, and we've come up with an agreed set of common principles for restarting the economy, all of it guided by science, and that continued collaboration is really important to the Prime Minister, I know, and he continues to speak very regularly with all of the premiers on how we could do this thoughtfully and do it in a way that makes sense not only for Canadians' health, but also for the economic success of the country.
Thank you, Rachel. And I completely understand this is an evolving, day by day sort of change we're seeing. So we're definitely staying tuned. And I think that's really the best advice we can give many entrepreneurs is that as this conversation evolves, we will get that information to them through a number of different mechanisms. So thank you for that. In terms of looking at small businesses and advice that you've been offering through these conversations, what advice do you have for small businesses that are struggling at this time? What advice of sort of support or encouragement have you been providing those that you're speaking to at the moment?
Well, as I said at the beginning, the anxiety and the stress is certainly there. So I think that, first and foremost, before getting into to the specifics of any, advice to businesses in particular, it's really more of a general comment of you take care of yourself. I think what I'm hearing and seeing is that this anxiety is affecting people very personally. That mental health is an issue that is important to the Prime Minister. It's important to me, and I hope that people feel supported. Supported not only through the business community, through Startup Canada and other mentorship groups and support groups, but also through our healthcare system. And we have made additional funding available for mental health supports online, and we will continue to pay very close attention to how Canadians are feeling as a result of the crisis. With respect to small business and advice I might have, it's funny because I on some of the calls where there are medium or larger sized businesses interacting and providing me with comments, my sense is that small businesses are perhaps best placed to pivot and to adjust. The small size of your business is probably going to allow you to change course more quickly than a larger business. I know that a lot of small businesses have taken the opportunity to ramp up their online offerings, whether through services or sales. EDC is offering free webinars to small business owners in order to help them get set up online. So that is been very interesting to see, because we have some interesting pickup on that. And though there is a lot of uncertainty, I think that some, some measure of comfort could be, the closeness or how much closer we have become government, to business. And so, as you were saying, a moment ago about staying informed, we are literally updating our website several times a day with new information. I would encourage folks to continue to connect on the website and see what's new and what is changing. The Prime Minister makes a daily address to Canadians where he often announces measures and supports for small business. So trying to stay informed. There's a plethora of information out there, and I know that it can be exhausting to keep up with everything, but it is important, I think, for our small businesses to continue to be informed of what we're doing for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So you spoke to this earlier lightly about the Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. So we did receive a number of questions on that. So maybe let's dive in there. Can you describe the program, maybe how it started, maybe any revisions that are coming into play, and how entrepreneurs can benefit from this program, specifically on the rent assistance side?
Sure. The program is I would say that it is designed in order for the landlord to apply in order to benefit the small business tenant. And that's an important piece, because often small business owners and entrepreneurs will contact me and say, well, how do I apply for this? And so the mechanism is really for you as a tenant to contact your landlord and begin those discussions. How can you work together in order to come to an agreement through this program? Our objective is to see your small business rent reduced by 75%, which I think is huge, and I know is so appreciated by so many small businesses. The government, provincial and federal, would cover 50% of the rent. The small business owner would be expected to pay 25% of the rent, and the landlord is being asked to assume 25% of the rent. The criteria, to get down to specifics, is that the small business tenant cannot pay more than $50,000 monthly in gross rent per location. They are, this program is designed for the smaller businesses, and they're meant to generate, therefore, revenue of no more than $20 million per year, calculated on a consolidated basis. And the final requirement is that they should have temporarily ceased operations, so generating no revenue at all, or at least experienced a 70% decline in revenues compared to either last year or to January and February of this year. So a similar a similar time frame to the wage subsidy. But that 70% reduction in revenue is quite high. So, this program is really designed for those businesses that have almost completely stopped operating or lost almost all of their revenue. And I guess I would just note that we are continuing to tweak this program, as you implied in your question. At the moment, it is only available to mortgaged properties, and we have heard comments from some small business tenants saying that it just so happens that their landlord owned the building, and so we're obviously concerned about that and trying to adjust as a result to include those buildings as well. So again, these conversations are what allows us, to get that kind of feedback. And I know that the Minister of Finance is working on improving the rent assistance program for everybody.
Thank you, Rachel. And so we did have another sort of follow-up question to that. Are there any resources for tenants if landlords are not willing, or if there might be pushback in this rental relief program? What resources can tenants use to sort of fuel that conversation?
It's a very good question. As late as midnight last night, I had that conversation. There are some small businesses, unfortunately, that are telling me that the landlords are not interested in taking, the 25% hit that would be required under the program. That is a reality for some. I say several things and I'm not sure that any of them, respond entirely, but one of the things that I always offer and that I've had some success with is to speak to the landlord myself. So if you as a small business, want to reach out to your member of parliament and say, can you make this call? Can you try and go to bat for me? It is soft pressure. There's no way that the government has any authority to force the landlord, to participate in this program. It's simply not possible. But I think that the added that extra mile that your member of parliament can do can play a difference. It has in the past for me. The other things are probably obvious to our entrepreneurs. Some small businesses were unable to pay the may rent entirely, and so perhaps suggesting to their landlord that getting 75% now versus deferring or not getting rent at all, would be more interesting. It really is a contractual relationship between tenant and landlord, and so depending on what your contract might say, you might have more or less rights in the circumstances. And being a former lawyer myself, I would not dream of giving legal advice on this call. So I would suggest that, if you do have questions, there are free legal clinics that have popped up all over the country, one here in Montreal, and I'd be happy to share the information should you wish. But I think it's important to understand your rights under your lease and make sure that you have an informed conversation with your landlord about how you can work, in order to move forward together. And certainly, if I can make the plug to ask all of the landlords that might be listening now or when you post this, that we are asking you to be leaders in your communities to help our small businesses come out on the other side of the crisis.
And that's what, you bring that great perspective from the legal side of things. These are contractual relationships that we have. So we need to, work within those parameters. But the legal clinic information is something that I think would be really valuable to share with those on the call and in general. So wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. So switching gears to social enterprises. So we know, Canada has seen a massive shift and uptake in social enterprises, either aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals or looking to make a social impact through their businesses. At the moment, are there programs in place from the Government of Canada that are specific to social enterprises, or are we still sort of looking at these general supports across entrepreneurs across Canada?
I think we're still looking at some of the general supports for social businesses. The importance of these organizations can't be underestimated. We have made so many of our programs for our small businesses also available to not-for-profits and social enterprises, and so many of the same programs will apply and will be available to you. I do think that we were kind of on a trend here in Canada of seeing so many more social enterprises pop up and into our ecosystem, and I hope that continues. I certainly was, a huge supporter, and I think that there is room now more than ever for the work that they do and the services that they could provide.
Wonderful. And if I can share some insights there on Startup Canada's social impact program, ESDC and through the federal government, there is still the investment readiness program that has a number of funding opportunities specifically for social enterprises. So we can distribute that, but that program still maintains even during COVID-19. So there's an opportunity there as well. Okay, then another question, sort of brainstorming, and obviously we have many entrepreneurs on this call with fantastic ideas. Is there a database or a marketplace for Canadian small businesses to offer help, like through digital transformation, to connect to those who need help? Is there an existing structure or program in place or that's being explored by the Government of Canada to connect these businesses digitally at the moment?
That is super interesting, and glad to take that question. So there have been many businesses that have put up their hand and asked what they can do, to help Canada. We've been focusing for the time being on PPE, and as you saw recently, a digital transformation of our healthcare system as well, investing in that. That was just announced over the weekend. But to take the first example, Canada's plan to mobilize industry to fight COVID-19, that was launched by Minister Baines a couple of weeks ago now, and completely overwhelmed by the response from the private sector. 22,000 submissions from companies interested in helping us with the needs at a national level in order to respond to COVID-19. So I mean, cannot tell you how heartwarming that was to see so many Canadians stepping up and wanting to be part of the solution. We've also spoken to about 3,000 companies that have offered their expertise, specifically for health care supplies. Although there's no database, that it's currently online, so that you could see all of the companies. I think that I'll take that back, because there's certainly an interest, at the very least. I'm thinking of companies who might want to know what other companies, would also be interested in working on this, and therefore, even if it's not from a government perspective, just so that the private sector can get organized and speak to one another to see how they can work together. I think that would be a really great idea.
Wonderful. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe one more thought on that. There is a new it's called Canadian Business Resilience Network, and so we partnered with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to launch that. So people might want to look up the Canadian Business Resilience Network. It's an initiative that brings together a network of about 400 or 500 chambers of commerce and boards of trade from all across Canada in various different industries. So I'm thinking of like associations like the Business Council of Canada, the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses, CFIB, manufacturers and exporters. So it's a really varied list, and it could be interesting for people to tap into that network.
Wonderful, Rachel. And so we have another question sort of along those lines today, talking about, strengthening cooperation between government, entrepreneurs, grassroots initiatives. I think during COVID-19, we've seen incredible public-private partnerships at a lightning fast speed. As we look to the future, do you have any thoughts about how we can leverage the success of these public-private partnerships into the future?
I've had a couple of conversations around PPPs. The interest around our infrastructure projects in Canada and what what some of the next steps might be are certainly top of mind to many in the private sector right now. And I'm always happy to have those conversations. As I mentioned before, we're not yet down to the nitty-gritty of those details. I think we're still, very much focused on reacting to the reality that we see today. But those conversations are happening in cabinet and in government. And if there are any suggestions or specific comments that you want me to share or bring back, I'm happy to do so. But I'm certainly in agreement there, Kayla.
Wonderful. And looking also at the academic and research community, are you seeing any innovations in that space and those academic and research community relationships with private sector partnerships with the public sector? Is there opportunity there to explore over the next couple of months as well?
I don't have the figure right off the top of my head, but there was just a couple of days ago a pretty significant amount of money destined to research, and a lot of that research is being done, out of Montreal and Toronto. And I think that the importance of the private sector connecting with those research institutions can't be underestimated. We know that our greatest successes come from that kind of partnership, and our universities in particular. When I think of the universities here in my riding, Université de Montréal, McGill, which is just a couple of blocks away from my riding, and others, they rely so much on that kind of collaboration with the private sector, with our pharma companies and others in order to advance science. And right now, we were criticized to some extent in our first mandate. In the first 4 years that we came in, we made huge investments in science and research. It's something that I was extremely proud of. My father is a medical researcher studying cancer and diabetes his entire life. And I don't think there's anybody today that would question the importance of funding science and more R&D. And so, my advice would be to again, stay informed on the latest. Almost daily, we're announcing new programs, including additional funding for research in various sectors, including health. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Then another question from our audience about pre-revenue startups. What support is in place at the moment for pre-revenue groups?
Well, we have a number of different measures that could be interesting. I've mentioned already a couple of them, but for pre-revenue, I would point again to Futurepreneur, just because I know there's such a great partner for our pre-revenue startups. But if there is, a payroll in place, then the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is also an option. And in terms of liquidity, there are loan guarantee and co-lending programs that the government has put in place in order to support you and your operations. And again, EDC and BDC are making funding available. But if you do have, once again, even a small payroll, then the $40,000 interest-free loan is also available to you. I fought very hard, as did the minister, for a lowering of the payroll requirement for the small business loan that I mentioned, but if you don't have a payroll at all, we are making sure that there is funding available for you as well. And so our regional development agencies, which I know many of you at Startup Canada know about, is going to step up with funding for companies that specifically are unable to access any of the other programs that I mentioned, any of the business programs that I mentioned. So that funding is really targeted to you if you have no payroll, if for whatever reason, none of the other programs are working for you at the moment. For example, you mentioned, Kayla, sole proprietorships. I think that the regional development agencies we'll have details soon about the funding that was announced a couple of weeks ago now. And in some communities, Community Futures, the Community Futures Network is also a very big player. And so they too have that funding in order to support our new startups and certainly those that are unable to get access to government programs otherwise.
And in terms of connecting to your RDAs or these regional groups, what would be the first step for our entrepreneurs to connect with them directly in advance of understanding that they haven't rolled out these programs yet, but so that they're ready and equipped to connect?
I mean, one of the things that I love about the RDAs is that it's very personal, and anybody who has interacted with them knows that you have like almost like a live coach dedicated to you, and you develop a relationship with them over time, and they think of you and they think of your business when they see new programs come out. So it's absolutely a fantastic program. And if you're not connected to an RDA, my first suggestion is always to make contact and to ask if you can have an advisor, or if you can meet with somebody, probably virtually at this point, but still, they're working flat out in order to continue to serve our businesses. So if you do not, have that contact yet, that would be my first suggestion. When you do get them on the phone, I would suggest mentioning the 675 million that the government has provided to Canada's regional development agencies, to show that that funding is there and that you want access to it. I think that never hurts, and that perhaps a couple of details about your business and why you would be eligible if, for example, you're not eligible for any of the other government programs. For Community Futures, if you're reaching out to them, the figure is close to 300 million. So the federal government has made that funding available and earmarked it for you and your business. So I wouldn't hesitate to reach out and to ask them how you can apply.
Wonderful. And I think that's a great comment. And many of the questions that we've had so far, I think that answers it beautifully, really connecting with those RDAs and demonstrating there is a massive investment in those spaces. So we need to tap into those for those who may have fallen through the cracks with other programs or have not been able to access them. So that's really encouraging to see that has been rolled out. If we look at, some of the incredible stories that are coming out of COVID-19, what are you seeing from the conversations that you're having with entrepreneurs, how they've been pivoting, every day at Startup Canada, we're hearing a number of incredible innovations coming to light. What have you been seeing sort of within your riding and in Quebec overall that might be responding to COVID-19 relief, or organizations just pivoting under this digital transformation sort of agenda that you were briefly discussing earlier?
Yeah, I mean, from pivoting, as you say, to offering very technical skills, to finding new ways to produce the items that they were making previously because of supply chain difficulties. I mean, I can think of at least 20 restaurant owners in my riding that are donating meals or providing meals to our frontline workers. We have a couple of hospitals in the riding, so it's definitely something that we see a lot. It's just been incredible to see the way the private sector has responded. As I mentioned earlier, 22,000 businesses have put up their hand in order to help respond to the crisis, and we were not expecting that. So I think that's a testament to just our incredible Canadian entrepreneurs. In terms of examples, I have maybe one or two. The Digital Technology Super Cluster challenged its network of 500 firms to come up with solutions to help Canadians get through the pandemic, and they received 300 submissions. I believe Toronto's DNA Stack is developing a new cloud-based network that allows researchers who are looking to improve our ability to diagnose and treat COVID-19 to share those findings. So that that is definitely a great example. Toronto's DNA Stack, and another company, FoodX, is working with its partners to develop an e-grocery management system to make sure our healthcare workers, seniors, and others have access to fresh food during the crisis. So another great example. I mean, my favorite cafe here in the Miland, which is not far from Ubisoft and a bit of the video game cluster in the riding. The cafe is called Olympico, but I mean, they just they put out like a comptoir, like just like a coffee counter that's kind of outside, and are serving their coffee outside. There's like a special social distancing lineup that they've got going, and I mentioned it to a couple of other MPs who said that they're seeing similar things in their ridings. I mean, sometimes it's huge and it's innovative and it's tech and it's complicated, and sometimes it's little things that you can do as a business owner in order to adapt. And I would say that adaptation has two purposes. Obviously, as a business owner, you need to continue doing business. And so that adaptation is obviously important for you. But from a social perspective, when I walked by that cafe, and I know when others did as well, it just signaled to us that, our community was still there. It was still vibrant. We're still able to take heart in seeing some of the institutions in our riding, because you're not only businesses, but you're part of the community. You're part of what makes our home, and for me, that's really important.
Oh, incredible, Rachel. I've got, absolutely. And that power of community, and really recognizing these innovations and this spirit of innovation in everything that we're seeing, even how people are configuring their home offices and, down to every sort of non-entrepreneur or intrapreneur. We're seeing incredible shifts in how people do the work that they do and how they connect with their communities. And I think there have been a number of really empowering moments that we've seen collectively across Canada as well, not having just this regional focus, but really coming together as a country and as a powerful nation during this moment. So really, really inspirational.
And talking about home offices, loving the art, Kayla.
Oh yeah, thanks. This is, and I try to shift to different rooms to try to illustrate that I'm in sort of different locations at different times, but you do what you can. Wonderful. So I think we've really covered some tremendous ground here, Rachel. So thank you for providing such helpful insights here. I think if we look to a final question, what would be the key takeaway that you want entrepreneurs to take out of today's conversation, and maybe one key resource that they should be tapping into? How can you crystallize that in maybe one key takeaway from today's session?
So a key takeaway would be, and I'm thinking as I'm speaking, just that we are very much interested in partnering with the private sector in order to make sure that our small businesses are able to survive the crisis. And in a way, I've been involved in government and around government for some time now. I have to say it's being done in a way that I've never seen before. It is truly like flying the plane as you're building it. We are literally mid-air, and when we get comments and feedback from our entrepreneurs, we are, going out there and changing the wing on the plane, because it's important to us that we not only put programs out there, but that we actually do what needs to be done in order to help you on the ground. And so you're the best, you're absolutely the best resource that we have in order to make sure that we are doing the right things in order to help your business survive. So if there is a takeaway, it's that we are partners in this, and that I hope that we can continue the conversation.
Wonderful, Rachel. Thank you so much. And sort of speaking to that collaboration opportunity, we actually do have a Q&A message from somebody responding to the request for this digital space for businesses to come together, that it is something that's being worked on by Amanda here. So if the person who asked the question is on the line, I'm happy to connect you and Amanda to take this business idea further, and then maybe connect with Rachel's team. So we can connect that. So innovation happening right here. Business ideas being thrown all over the place. That's wonderful. Well, thank you again so much, Rachel, for participating in today's session. This has been a really informative entrepreneur town hall. I really appreciate your receptivity to the questions that we have from our audience, and providing some concrete supports and recommendations, and really getting that information into the hands of those that need it most at this critical time.
And thank you for everything that you do, Startup Canada. Absolutely incredible. Just, this example with Amanda contacting you, proof positive that you have your finger on the pulse, as always, and love working with you and partnering with you. If there's ever anything that I can do, I look forward to helping perhaps on a future call, and certainly to receiving the comments and feedback that you might get in writing. I'll be looking out for those emails.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you to everybody who joined the call. As many of you know, this is a series of entrepreneur town halls that Startup Canada is hosting, that we began about 5 weeks ago, that we will continue to do across the country. So making sure that we're connecting with different regions, different provinces, and having your voices heard from parliamentarians, and really getting that connection piece and providing that connective tissue and this collective conversation that we're happening across Canada. So thank you for participating in today's session. Thank you for providing your questions. And thank you so much, Rachel, for taking the time.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a great afternoon, everyone.